It is always difficult to know how to begin, and so I thought in the first instant I might identify myself with you as a fellow religious on this pilgrimage, to see and to show the Father's face in the world. It is not something that I have achieved and you haven't that makes me a more worthy speaker. I must say, like Paul, I am with you and like you a religious, with my own struggles and my own confusion in this calling. It is for this reason that I am making this pilgrimage with you and trying to make your struggles my own, so that we might get out of this conference some measure of what we put into it. We would do well to consider this one question that has often haunted me, and it is this: if I were not a religious, what would I be? Maybe we may have been teachers or engineers, or maybe even managers, or whatever other secular specialization oriented us. But would we be as comfortable as we are now? Would we have the same security as we have now? We might not have the same salary, but we most certainly have the comfort that a salary might bring, and even more. We do have to admit that we are better off than most people our age in the world. For more than one reason, we might envy them, or we might even covet them for what they are. We realize very little that we are belongs to us. We realize also that the people they are who suffer, are stressed, are often worse off than we are. They have to make projections for their retirement, for their old age. We might have to think of how we conceive of our old age. Those who are not so young and listening to me might consider what kind of lives they have lived. But more than that, we have to admit that we are taken care of in every sense of the term. We have every comfort that others don't have. The congregation protects us, and perhaps more than our families could have. Certainly, God did not choose us because we were better than anyone else. There are thousands of others better than ourselves, maybe even holier than ourselves, and yet God chose us. I think of what Paul wrote to the Corinthians when he said, "Consider, brothers, how you were called. Not many of you are wise by human standards, nor many influential, nor many from noble families. No, God chose those whom human standards call fools to shame the wise. He chose those whom by human standards are weak to shame the strong. Those who by human standards are common and contemptible indeed. Those who count for nothing, to reduce to nothing all those that who do count for something, so that no human being might feel boastful before God. We therefore are not proud of ourselves, but we rejoice in the goodness of God who has been true to His promise. The humility with which we ought to live the rest of our lives, already considering our consecration being a call to a holy humility. The word itself is not much spoken of today. It is not even mentioned. Yet, next to holiness, we cannot consider ourselves better than others, or shouldn't make us feel holier than others. I think we should feel humble, and in that humility, we will touch the heart of God. It is in this spirit that we can understand our calling and better appreciate it, and therefore live our lives in humble gratitude to the Almighty who has done great things for us. We are called to rejoice as we count our blessings daily. Whatever it does, this is all part of our journey, our pilgrimage. Everything ought to lead us to holiness, as mentioned earlier. I think we ought to realize that our holiness is a calling. As John Paul II said in his letter Novo Millennio in Iunte, number 30, and I quote, "First of all, I have no hesitation in saying that all pastoral initiatives must be set in relation to holiness. Was this not the ultimate meaning of the Jubilee indulgence as a special grace offered by Christ so that the life of every baptized person could be purified and deeply renewed? It is my hope that among those who have taken part in the Jubilee, many will have benefited from this grace, in full awareness of its demands. Once the Jubilee is over, we resume our normal path, but knowing that stressing holiness is more an urgent pastoral task. We have been in religious life for 2, 3, 5, 10, 20, 30 years or more, have we not? The Holy Father tells us with a note of caution as he concluded the Jubilee, we will resume our normal path. The normal path ought to be strewn with a greater preoccupation to holiness. The Duc in altum, launch out into the deep, for us is the risk we need to take in order to be more preoccupied with our religious life. Who in the world can afford the luxury of attending retreats or putting aside for these days or for this day with not a care in the world to worry about our food or shelter or earning our keep or just concentrating on being holy? Our congregating together would be like a convention of doctors or dentists or engineers or whatever, with one difference. Have you ever thought of them? They come back from a conference and having learnt about a new drug to be administered for something or a new instrument to be used for more efficient production, would not purchase it and start using it. We, on the other hand, would, in the words of John Paul, resume our normal life. The Holy Father has asked us, resume our normal life, but with one difference, knowing and stressing holiness. That will remain our urgent pastoral task. We see then that holiness is not holiness for its own sake or for the sake of one's sanctification, but holiness is an urgent pastoral task. We would do well then to learn from our document Vita Consecrata to contemplate the face of Christ transfigured. He is the icon that we ought to fix our gaze on. Why? In its desire to transfigure the world and life itself, in the expectation of the definitive vision of God's countenance. Number 6 of that document. Our theme then, the document continues, the religious of today likewise strives to create a harmonious balance between the interior life and his work. In the evangelical commitment to his conversion of life, obedience and stability, and in persevering dedication to meditation on God's Word. With this in mind, we take our pilgrimage to the movement of 3 high places, steeped in Scripture and at the same time possibly translated in our lives. The Mount of Olives, Mount Tabor, and Mount Calvary. The Mount of Olives has always been considered with a strategic point of view because Jesus would look at Jerusalem from there. Jerusalem, the shining city on the hill. The Mount of Olives is situated just outside the city of Jerusalem. It was a place of decision making, a place of many choices, The Garden of Gethsemane, you will know, was close by. The agony of decision was to take place there. We too might have our own struggles that we might have to face on this mount. May we, with Christ by our side, face this moment of truth in our lives. This conference might bring to surface certain facts of our lives. We might just want to hide, or we might not want to look at. We may have the strength to work on ourselves because Christ works with us. We move now to Mount Calvary, the Mount of Skulls. This was the place outside the city. This mount, as it is sarcastically called, was a rubbish dump in the city of Jerusalem. People came out and in by the same gate and would see many crosses with corpses lying on them decaying. This was the common place of execution, the place of ultimate shame, the place where everything was laid bare, the place the criminal reached the final moments of his life alone in the stench of garbage and fetid decomposition. This was where the person of Christ was totally held to scorn. It is with this same Christ that we can empathize in our moments of ridicule and shame, and even realize that this will be our moment of ultimate loneliness. For in the lonesome moments in our lives, we realize that Calvary is our place. Each of us lives our Calvary, especially when we realize our rooms are devoid of people and our beds are devoid of partners. And when we come to the members of our community that divine providence has ordained for us, we would feel a collective loneliness. It can be very lonesome sometimes, even in a community. And we will learn to hold on to that experience to the very end when we say, Father, into your hands I commend my spirit. It is not easy to say that. And yet, sometimes we are faced with the temptation of always wanting to keep company with someone. Our company should be with the Lord. Our Holy Father gives us this secret again in his Jubilee letter. I quote, "As on Good Friday and Holy Saturday, the Church passes in contemplation of this bleeding face, which conceals the life of God and offers salvation to the world. Her contemplation of Christ's face cannot stop at the image of the crucified one. He is the risen one. Were this not so, our preaching would be in vain and our faith empty." The resurrection was the Father's response to Christ's obedience. As we learn from the letter to the Hebrews, in the days of his flesh, Jesus offered up prayers and supplications with loud cries and tears to him who was able to save him from death, and he was heard for his godly fear. Son though he was, he learned obedience through what he suffered, and being made perfect, he became the source of eternal salvation to all who obey him. We realize that we are not alone in our suffering, therefore. Our consolation is that we are supported by a supportive community of brothers or sisters who seek to be there for us, for our edification, for our help. We need to feel this. We need to, you might say, make use of this. We move from here to the next mount, Mount Tabor. It is for us the Mount of the Transfiguration, of triumph. It is a dance of shadow and radiance. It happens on the mountain, and we have to climb this mountain with Christ. We are at different stages in our religious life as we climb this mountain, as we approach this encounter with the Lord. It is difficult for some of us to climb, for it might mean leaving familiar things behind. It means being detached from all that we hold dear. It means leaving behind the security of our own decisions and our own choices. And so, up the mountain we now go. To ascend either of these mountains, of Calvary or Tabor, we need to be light-hearted, yet sure-footed. We need light hearts, not burdened with cares for our apostolate or our preoccupations, or we would not see the transfiguration. We might not experience the loneliness or the indecision that comes from this encounter with the God we cannot see. We need to be sure-footed. None of us can dilly-dally. We have our feet in two boats if we do so. We have to be either out or in. We are with Christ more deeply, or we've turned a deaf ear to Him. What will it be? It is a chance to hope and to believe that we are being accompanied by so many of our patrons and the people who are praying for us as we take up this climb. To climb this mountain means believing that there is a top and there is the other side. The other side of which Martin Luther King spoke when he said, "God has allowed me to go up the mountain, and I have seen the other side. I may not get there with you, but I want you to know that we have, as a people, will get to the promised land." Let us assure ourselves of the reward that will be ours when we realize that we climb in the company of so many others, and that there is a top, and there is a reason and a season for change. Now is the acceptable time. This is the day of salvation. All of us, in a sense, are disabled. And in a more profound sense, we are all able. We might tend to be intimidated by the seniority of some or the experience of others. Let us realize that the Lord works in His own way in each of us, meeting our inadequacy with His fullness, and at the same time pruning those which go astray. We come together as a community to celebrate this experience of our frailty, as a community and as individuals. With the many tensions that might exist within us, we are still people with tremendous potential. And at the same time, we are aware of our weaknesses. And this ought to make us humble. For our humility, we shall be able to touch the heart of God. Therefore, our journey is a journey together with people of like minds. May I invite you to join one another on this journey. For some, it might be a burden too heavy to bear. For others, it might be unimaginably simple. To all I say what the letter of the Hebrews says: strive to proffer a sense of encouragement and edification to each other, so that, like Philip, we can say, "Lord, show us the Father." Let this be done in a spirit of love, and the God of love will be with us. God bless you.